You're exhausted, not because you're doing too much, but because you're trying too hard. Trying to be perfect. Trying to stay in control. Trying to figure everything out before it happens. But what if I told you that this obsession with effort is the very thing killing your peace of mind? Michel de Montaigne, a 16th century philosopher, left us a cure, and it's not about doing more. It's about finally letting go. In this video, we'll break down how overthinking, perfectionism, and the need to control are symptoms of a deeper fear, and how Montaigne's unconventional wisdom offers a way out. You'll learn why trying too hard is a subtle form of self-sabotage, how effortlessness can be a form of strength, and how embracing uncertainty can bring clarity. If you've ever felt mentally stuck, emotionally drained, or haunted by your own expectations, this will hit home. So ask yourself, are you always second-guessing? Do you feel like you're never enough, no matter how much you do? Have you become addicted to fixing everything, even yourself? Then stay with me, because by the end of this video, you won't just understand Montaigne's philosophy. You'll feel lighter, clearer, and finally free from the trap of overthinking. They wake up tired, even after 8 hours of sleep. They go through their day feeling like they're chasing something, yet they can't quite name it. The weight they carry isn't physical, but it's crushing. It's the invisible burden of always needing to get it right. Montaigne saw this centuries ago. When you're constantly trying to be better, faster, smarter, you're not actually living. You're surviving under self-imposed pressure. And here's the trap: society rewards this exhaustion. Hustle culture calls it ambition. Perfectionism is dressed up as high standards. But Montaigne whispers from the past, reminding us that frantic effort is often a subtle form of fear. Fear of what? Of being ordinary, of not mattering. So we try harder, smile bigger, talk louder, and silently collapse inside. Take a look around. The person who never rests, who's always busy, they're not winning, they're just terrified of being still. Stillness, after all, forces you to hear your own thoughts. And most people don't like what they hear. That's why they keep moving. They'd rather exhaust themselves than confront the possibility that they've built a life based on performance, not peace. Now think of someone at work who always says yes, who never takes a break, who volunteers for every project. It might look like commitment, but often it's a strategy to avoid feeling unworthy. Montaigne would have smiled at this modern madness. He believed real dignity isn't loud, it's quiet. It doesn't come from doing more, but from needing less. So here's the question no one asks. What if trying harder is exactly what's making you feel stuck? What if the path forward isn't more effort, but less resistance? It's a dangerous idea, one that threatens our addiction to achievement. But Montaigne didn't care for safe ideas. He cared for true ones. And if this makes you uncomfortable, good. Because discomfort is often the door to realizing that your obsession with doing everything right may be the very thing pulling you further from peace. And that brings us to something even more fragile than effort: control itself. We all have this quiet superstition. If we just plan enough, if we just try hard enough, the chaos will finally obey us. It's comforting, right? The spreadsheet, the morning routine, the 5-year plan, all promises of safety. But Montaigne knew better. He saw that life doesn't bow to willpower. The tighter you clench your fist, the more life slips through your fingers. Control is the lie we tell ourselves to feel less afraid. That if we anticipate every outcome, we won't get hurt. But real life doesn't play fair. People betray, markets crash, bodies age, and feelings change. And no checklist will stop it. You can wear the seatbelt, eat clean, meditate daily, and still get blindsided by reality. So what's the cost of control? Constant tension, anxious hypervigilance, emotional burnout. Ever notice how the people most obsessed with control are also the most fragile? One minor change and their world collapses. They don't adapt, they panic. That's because their peace was never real. It was built on the illusion that life could be tamed. But life isn't a machine. It's a storm, beautiful, wild, and unapologetically unpredictable. Montaigne didn't fear that. He accepted it, even trusted it. And the irony? The more you try to control your mind, your thoughts, your reactions, your emotions, the more chaotic they become. You sit down to relax, and suddenly your brain's on fire. Why? Because you've trained it to associate stillness with danger. That silence is something to fill, not feel. So you scroll, eat, talk, anything but surrender. Because surrender feels like death to the ego. But Montaigne flipped that idea on its head. What if surrender is not weakness, but clarity? What if the goal is not to dominate life, but to dance with it? Think of improvisational jazz. No script, no plan, just presence. That's how Montaigne approached existence, not like a general marching through a war, but like a poet wandering through fog, not needing to see the whole path to keep walking. And here's what no one tells you. The less you need control, the more power you actually have. Because you're no longer reacting out of fear, you're responding out of awareness. And that's where things start to get interesting. Because once you stop trying to dominate your thoughts, you begin to see just how much of them were never really yours to begin with. You lie awake at 2 a.m., replaying a conversation from 3 days ago. Why? What are you hoping to fix? The truth is, your brain isn't solving, it's rehearsing pain. Montaigne saw this centuries ago. When the mind tries too hard to make sense of life, it stops living. It clings to thoughts like a drowning man clings to debris. But thinking isn't always thinking. Sometimes it's self-sabotage dressed as insight. We've pathologized distraction, yet we worship mental control. You're praised for being analytical, rational, aware. But is it really awareness, or is it avoidance? Overthinking is the ego's last stand. It would rather spin endless narratives than admit it doesn't know, that it's vulnerable, that it can't predict who will leave, what will happen, or how it all ends. Montaigne didn't write in straight lines. His essays meandered like rivers, doubling back, losing themselves. And he liked it that way, because life isn't a thesis. It's a tangle, a blur. And the moment you demand clarity from it, demand that your pain makes sense, you begin to suffer more. The search for meaning becomes a prison. The more you chase resolution, the further it runs. You tell yourself, I'm just trying to understand. But is that true? Or are you addicted to the illusion of control that overthinking provides? It's comforting to believe that if you think long enough, you'll finally arrive at peace. But thought has no finish line, no endpoint. It loops, and what starts as reflection can quietly become torment. Ask yourself this: if thinking was really helping, wouldn't you be free by now? Wouldn't the loop have ended? Maybe the goal isn't to figure things out. Maybe it's to let them pass. Montaigne understood that not all discomfort requires a theory. Some things are meant to be felt, not solved. And the more you try to intellectualize your emotions, the more lifeless they become. Let your mind wander without needing it to arrive. Let your thoughts float without needing to anchor them. There's wisdom in the drift, in the pause between thoughts, in the silence your ego fears. Overthinking is not insight. It's anxiety wearing a crown. And maybe, just maybe, the cure isn't to think harder, but to think less. What if your constant need to try harder isn't noble, but narcissistic? Montaigne would suggest it's not always discipline that drives us. It's the fear of insignificance. Behind every desperate push for more, there's a whisper, I'm not enough yet. And effort becomes the performance of worth. A way to avoid stillness, because in stillness we have no excuse. No applause. Just ourselves exposed. We romanticize effort like it's proof of moral superiority. But sometimes it's just the ego trying to outrun shame. We need to be seen as tireless, driven, relentless. Why? Because being ordinary feels unbearable. Because slowing down makes us feel replaceable. Montaigne saw this in scholars who buried themselves in books, not for truth, but to escape themselves. Look closer at your ambition. Is it really about the goal, or is it about proving something? Effort, when hijacked by ego, becomes an identity. I'm the one who never gives up. I'm always busy. But what happens when you stop? Do you feel worthless? Anxious? Lost? That discomfort is the voice of the ego, suddenly without a role to play. And here's the paradox. The more effort becomes your identity, the more fragile you become. If rest threatens your sense of self, are you really strong, or just dependent on hustle to feel real? Montaigne believed that effort without reflection was a form of self-deception, a mask worn so tightly that we mistake it for our face. You're not lazy for pausing, you're just finally confronting your own silence. We often fear being nobody, but Montaigne would ask, what's so terrible about that? What if you didn't have to be special, excellent, or impressive to be whole? What if effort wasn't your salvation but your cage? The ego wants to be admired, but the soul, perhaps, just wants peace. And peace doesn't need an audience. So try this: stop trying, just for a moment. Not to give up, but to see who you are without effort. If that terrifies you, don't look away. That terror is the clue. The ego feeds on effort because it fears irrelevance. But you don't need to earn your existence. You're already here. Montaigne knew there is freedom in being nobody. Why do we treat not knowing like a flaw? In school, in life, even in therapy, we chase answers like trophies. But Montaigne didn't. He wrote in circles, got distracted mid-thought, contradicted himself. And not because he was confused, but because he was honest. Life is fragmented. So why do we pretend we're supposed to be polished, consistent, final? There's a silent violence in perfectionism. Every unfinished idea gets labeled as failure. Every doubt feels like a weakness. But Montaigne cherished paradox. He let his thoughts be human, messy, unsure, evolving. What if you stopped editing your soul to fit someone else's blueprint? What if your contradictions aren't flaws, but fingerprints? In a world addicted to clarity, ambiguity feels like a threat. But have you noticed how artificial clarity often feels? Like a smile stretched too wide, like a TED Talk on loop. Montaigne invites you to question that performance. What if wisdom lives in the pause, in the refusal to conclude? In the sacred space where the answer hasn't arrived, and maybe never will? We chase completion like it will give us peace. But what if it only gives us boredom? Think about it. When was the last time you felt alive in a moment that was clean, predictable, and complete? Isn't it the unfinished stories, the almosts, the maybes, the unresolved, that haunt us in the best way? Montaigne didn't want to arrive. He wanted to roam. You don't need to be a coherent brand. You don't need to have your life story wrapped in a bow. Let the edges fray. Let the narrative unravel. That's where vitality leaks through. Montaigne would say, a person fully figured out is a person who stopped growing. So maybe your contradictions aren't a crisis. Maybe they're a pulse. So next time you feel the itch to fix yourself, wait. Sit in the discomfort of not being done. Let others misread you. Let the loose ends dangle. There's a kind of quiet rebellion in that. In a culture that worships flawless self-improvement, Montaigne offers something far more radical: the courage to stay unfinished. You've tried it. You've sat down, journaled, reflected, overanalyzed, rewound conversations in your head 100 times. And still, the anxiety is there. Why? Because thinking is not a cure for feeling. Montaigne understood this centuries ago. The mind, left unchecked, doesn't solve suffering, it recycles it. Thought becomes a cage disguised as a key. Anxiety feeds on loops. The more you try to figure it out, the deeper the spiral goes. Your mind offers theories, stories, predictions, each one more elaborate than the last, and yet none bring relief. That's because relief doesn't come from solving. It comes from surrendering. But how do you surrender when your ego insists there must be an answer? Modern culture rewards introspection. But Montaigne warns, when introspection becomes obsession, it becomes self-harm. Think of it like this: your inner world isn't a puzzle to complete, but a sea to float in. You don't need to explain every wave. You need to stop drowning in the analysis. Can you feel the difference between awareness and fixation? There's something seductive about believing if you just think a little harder, you'll find peace. But peace doesn't respond to pressure. It's not an intellectual conquest, it's a nervous system response. Montaigne knew that stillness isn't a product of thought, but of presence. You don't need more conclusions. You need to feel your feet on the floor. Here's the paradox: the more anxious you are, the more you try to think clearly. But anxiety corrupts clarity. It hijacks your logic, twists your intuition, and tells you lies that feel like truths. So what if you stop trusting your thoughts during anxious moments? Not suppressing them, just observing like Montaigne did. Not a warrior in your mind, just a witness. What would happen if you stopped trying to fix your anxiety and started listening to it like an old friend? Not indulging it, not resisting it, just allowing it. That's where Montaigne points us, toward a softer kind of bravery. Not solving, not escaping, just being. Maybe the most radical move in an anxious world is to sit still and feel it, without needing to win. There's a kind of strength that looks like laziness to the anxious mind. It's not apathy. It's not weakness. It's the refusal to fight battles that don't matter. Montaigne lived with a quiet rebellion. He didn't chase glory. He questioned the chase itself. What if our constant striving isn't noble, but a form of self-abandonment? Who are you when you stop performing? Most people are terrified of seeming lazy. But look deeper. Is your drive coming from inspiration or insecurity? Are you building your life or trying to prove you deserve to exist? Effort becomes toxic when it's fueled by fear. Montaigne wasn't against ambition. He was against ambition that erodes your ability to be here now. Can you tell the difference? There's a softness in his writings, but don't mistake it for passivity. He wasn't teaching people to give up. He was teaching them to stop forcing, to stop treating life like a war. True effortlessness is not doing nothing. It's doing what matters without self-violence, without tension, without turning your day into a battleground between should and want. Let's be honest, effort feels good when it's aligned, when it's yours. But so many of us are running on scripts we didn't write, hustling for validation, grinding for illusions. When Montaigne withdrew from public life, people thought he was wasting his potential. In truth, he was protecting it. Can you recognize the places where your fire is being stolen? Effortlessness isn't the absence of action, it's the absence of panic. It's when your actions rise naturally, without inner punishment. Have you ever been so immersed in something that it didn't feel like effort? That's the zone Montaigne lived in. Not urgency, but flow. Not proving, but participating. What if you lived more from that place? So here's the brutal truth. Some people will never respect effortlessness because they're addicted to struggle. They worship exhaustion like a badge. But that's not your path. Not anymore. Montaigne shows us another way. Curiosity without pressure, movement without panic, excellence without anxiety. And maybe, just maybe, that's where life actually begins. You've been taught to fear drift, to treat confusion like failure, to see uncertainty as weakness. But Montaigne would laugh at that rigidity, not out of mockery but wisdom. He knew something modern minds forget. Clarity isn't a place you reach, it's a fog that lifts when you stop chasing it. So here's a hard question. What if your obsession with direction is what's keeping you lost? Think about it. Who told you life needs a straight line? School? Social media? Your own fear of becoming nothing? But are you really nothing, or just not branded yet? The pressure to find a path often comes from ego, not purpose. Montaigne drifted on purpose. He let curiosity lead, not control. He trusted the unknown more than the illusion of plans. In a world that glorifies 5-year goals and tidy timelines, drifting looks dangerous. But what's more dangerous, wandering or forcing yourself into a mold that quietly kills you? We romanticize clarity, but it can be a cage. You pick a path just to silence your own panic, not because it's right. And one day, you wake up successful and empty. Is that winning? Drift, to Montaigne, wasn't aimlessness, it was honesty. He didn't pretend to have it all figured out. His writing moves like a river, unpredictable, alive. That's not weakness, that's alignment with reality. Because truth rarely arrives in straight lines. It shows up in spirals, side roads, detours you didn't ask for. Have you been ignoring your detours? We all want a narrative, a clean arc, a reason. But Montaigne warns, if you demand clarity too soon, you end up clinging to fiction. The truth of who you are can't be rushed. It's revealed slowly in fragments, in moments when you're not performing. Have you ever let yourself be in between without shame? Or do you rush to define, label, finalize? So maybe drifting is not a mistake. Maybe it's sacred. The part of you that doesn't know what's next, that's the part still alive, still searching, still becoming. Montaigne invites us to stay there longer, to stop bulldozing our questions with answers, to walk without a map. Because sometimes the clearest thing we can do is to trust the blur. What if the greatest enemy to your peace of mind isn't failure, but your fear of it? Montaigne saw through this facade. We're so afraid of looking foolish that we trap ourselves in an endless cycle of self-judgment. The inner critic thrives in that space, the one where we try too hard to protect our image. But what if the cure isn't fighting it, but laughing at it? We carry this oppressive voice in our heads, constantly telling us we're not enough, that we'll never be good enough. But ask yourself this: who decided the standards we're trying to meet? Who wrote the script you're desperately acting out? When was the last time you stepped back and realized that all this self-criticism is just a play for validation, a performance in front of an invisible audience? Montaigne's approach was radical. Humor isn't just a distraction, it's liberation. When we laugh at ourselves, we dissolve the tension. The inner critic loses its power because it thrives on fear, on seriousness. The more seriously you take yourself, the stronger the critic becomes. But when you step out of the role and laugh, when you let the critic know it's a joke, suddenly, you take the first step toward freedom. The psychology behind this is profound. The moment you laugh at your flaws, they lose their grip. It's like taking away the microphone from the critic. Suddenly, the stage is empty. When we learn to laugh at our mistakes, we accept them. We stop fighting against our imperfections, and instead, we embrace them. Isn't it time you stopped fearing your own humanity? But here's the paradox. The more you try to suppress the critic, the louder it gets. It feeds on resistance. But if you stop resisting and just let it be, the voice quiets. You realize that it was never as powerful as you thought. Have you ever noticed how much energy you spend fighting it? What if the real secret to overcoming the critic is giving up the fight entirely? Maybe it's time to step out of the shadow of your inner critic. Maybe the way forward isn't through more effort or striving, but by allowing yourself to be imperfect and laughing when you mess up. If you can't find humor in your own journey, you're taking life too seriously. What if you stopped fighting for perfection and started enjoying the ride instead? After all the reflections, the observations, the doubts, Montaigne's ultimate conclusion is simple, yet profound. You're already human, and that's enough. What if the key to peace lies in accepting that you don't need to be anything more than what you already are? We live in a world where we're constantly urged to improve, to achieve, to become. But Montaigne invites us to step away from that noise and embrace the messy, imperfect, beautiful reality of our own humanity. We're so obsessed with performing, with proving, with showing the world that we're worthy, that we forget the essence of what makes us human is imperfection. In a society that praises the polished, the perfect, and the flawless, Montaigne's message stands as a radical act of rebellion, to simply be. He asks us to let go of the suffocating need to constantly strive for something more, and instead find peace in the present moment, exactly as we are. What if you stop performing? What if you stop chasing some future version of yourself that you think will be better, more acceptable, more successful? In our obsession with doing and becoming, we forget that our humanity isn't a product to be perfected. It's a state to be experienced. You don't need to achieve anything to be worthy of love, of peace, or of happiness. What if being enough is just about being present? Montaigne's final message isn't a call to do less. It's a call to let go of the burdens we've placed on ourselves. We've internalized the belief that if we're not constantly improving, we're falling behind. But where does that leave us? In a never-ending chase, disconnected from the beauty of simply living. Life doesn't require constant effort. The more you try to perform your life, the more you lose sight of it. Why not step back and just let it unfold? The most radical act of self-liberation might not be pushing harder, achieving more, or doing better. It might be in stopping and realizing that you don't need to control everything. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to be human, to feel, to experience, to exist without the weight of expectations. Imagine the freedom in that. How much energy could you reclaim if you stopped striving to be something you think you should be, and simply allowed yourself to be what you already are? So here's the question. What if the only thing you need to change is your approach to your own humanity? What if you stop trying to perfect yourself and instead learn to relax into your own messy, flawed, beautiful existence? Because in the end, Montaigne's message is clear. You are enough just as you are. Life doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be lived. If Montaigne's wisdom resonated with you, it's time to stop chasing perfection and start embracing the beauty of your own humanity. Let go of the need to perform and be enough just as you are. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and join us as we explore more profound insights on how to live a life of purpose, not pressure. Drop a comment below. How can you start relaxing into your own humanity today? Let's discuss. And remember, you don't need to be perfect, just be present.